Call the planning and zoning meeting to order. Everybody stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have roll call. Jay Swin.
Here.
Jeanette Lambie-Holman.
Here.
Phyllis Box, absent. Wolf Smith. Here. Dave Clark.
Here.
Mark Denny.
Here.
Chris Ramos is absent. John Matthews.
Here.
And I'm present, Steve Rosenthal, so we have 7 members present. Do I have a motion on the agenda? I have only one item on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the agenda for this evening.
Second.
Mark and
CR one of you.
Steve, second. And I should have done the wrong person. I have a motion on the floor and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? No. Roll call vote. Jay Swin.
Yes.
Jeanette Lambie-Holman.
Yes.
Wolf Smith.
Yes.
Dave Clark.
Yes.
Mark Denny.
Yes.
John Matthews.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion carries 7-0. Okay. One and only item is Leavenworth County Road 1, CR1 land use analysis. Consideration of land use analysis for existing corridor conditions, data finding, future development goals, future land use maps, concept and design guidance, request submitted by planning and zoning staff. Staff report.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm sure some of you were here when we did the County Road 1 plan back in 2008. We did the special development district. I know a few of you were here. So we went through the same thing at that time with the public hearings and all that. So I just want to go through some of the background that we had regarding County Road 1, and then we also have the consultant giving a presentation on the entire plan. Back in 2005, 1-cent sales tax was passed by the citizens of the county to fund the infrastructure in the county, and that paved the way to the construction of the County Road 1. So in 2008, the road was constructed. The county spent around $14 million that was the cost of the whole construction, and that was in partnership with City of Tonganoxie and KTA. At that time, a land use plan was recommended, but that never happened because of some funding problems. So 10 years later, here we are. The Board of County Commission approved to go forward and do the land use plan, and we hired the consultant Rayo, and Travis is here representing them. So we started the process like 2 months ago. We did 2 stakeholder meetings and 2 public meetings, and we received a lot of input from a lot of people. Based on that, we created 2 scenarios. So one is concept A and concept B. Concept A is the highest and best use. The county spent all their money, looking for some revenue back. So based on that, we have this plan that shows a lot of commercial within the corridor. Just to give you a background, the corridor is from the southern part of Tonganoxie all the way to K32. So it's almost 6 miles north to south, and then it's 1.5 miles on both sides of County Road 1. And we still have the special development district for that area, and we have some basic guidelines that help us with, if some development comes in, we still can handle that. So concept A has a lot of commercial and on both sides of County Road 1, and we also have a lot of multifamily, high-density residential to buffer some of the commercial areas from single family, and some of the green spaces to buffer from single family as well. So if you look at just along the County Road 1, we have a lot of mixed use. Mixed use meaning industrial, commercial, office, or retail. And we also have industrial within the close to the interchange. So this purple is the industrial, and all these other areas like mixed use and commercial. So that's concept A. That's what the professional staff is recommending based on what the county was expecting from that area, from what the county spent all the money for. Concept B is basically just touches two areas, just two commercial spots, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is as is. There is no change whatsoever. That's based on all the input and from all the meetings that we had with the public. So there you are. So your job tonight is to look at these two concepts and make a recommendation on one concept that will go before the Board of County Commission for final approval. With that, I'll hand it over to our consultant.
Good evening. My name is Travis Pendleton. I am with Vireo, and I was the project manager for the Leavenworth County Road 1 land use analysis. What I'm going to go through now is give you a real good overview of our process, the data that we use to develop the concepts that you're seeing, and near the end, then we'll do a comparison of some of the outcomes of the land use maps. I'm going to go right to our process. We've been working on this since the spring. We had 3 steps, and Jeff went through our meetings and things of that sort. We did have 2 public meetings. We met 2 times with our stakeholders, our focus group, and we had online engagement as well as social media. How many of y'all know we have a Facebook page for this project? We put information on Facebook so that we could reach a lot of people at one time. So that's how we provided additional notice for our public meetings that we had. We also did postcards for that as well. One of the things that we really like to do when we're doing a planning project or we're doing land use analysis is take a look at the context, like where are we as a region, where are we locally? And so the map that you're looking at right now is a map of our Kansas City metropolitan region. And what it's showing is where there are projected to be population losses and gains. So in the blue, you see population gains. Is this working? Okay. This right here is Tonganoxie. Tonganoxie is in one of the areas that is growing. We know that Tonganoxie and Basehor are 2 of the fastest growing communities in your area or in the state. But most of the growth is happening around the Kansas City metropolitan area as people begin to leave. When we're talking about Kansas City Metro, I'm talking about Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri. People are leaving those areas and coming out to communities like Tonganoxie. The Mid-America Regional Council is our regional planning organization, and they have a vision plan, a document that describes where we're supposed to be going as a region. And it's all about being vibrant, connected, and green. And so it has to do with providing options in your transportation network, has to do with reinvesting in your communities, designing for healthy lifestyles, thinking about energy efficiency, thinking about equity in your economy, and then what places and processes do you have and how are those things working together. That makes up our regional vision. When we come down from just the region and all of its cities and counties, we're coming down to just the local context, and if we zoom all the way down to County Road 1, and Jeff went over where our study area is, that's what you're seeing on screen. On the left, what you see is existing land use, and on the right, what you see is existing zoning. Where you see on the left existing land use and you see the light colors and then the green, that's your rural residential areas. Where you have what we might call low-density residential, smaller lots, is what you see in yellow. Those are where you have your single-family homes on smaller lots. When you look at the zoning, y'all are familiar with your zoning ordinance and your zoning districts. You know that that darker area up around the Tonganoxie Business Park, that darker green area up here, that is your rural residential zoning where you have to have a minimum of 2.5 acres for your home. And in the lower area, South of the business park, you start to see rural residential again, but you have to have a minimum of 5 acres when you're doing residential development. The only commercial development, is down there at K32. There's a little bit of commercial zoning down there. What we look at when we look at compare zoning and land use is we try to see if they're consistent. Consistent meaning, you don't suddenly have a commercial land use, for example, where you have commercial zoning where you have residential existing land use. The other thing that we look at are parcel acreages and drainage patterns. So the big thing with the corridor is that there's so much beautiful space there, and that you're really talking about scale and size. This is showing from really small lots in the yellow to lots that are over 20 acres in size, and you see there's a lot of that, a lot of brown on the map. And then drainage, your lower drainage areas are where you have your bodies of water, so your creeks. We also look at infrastructure, so what utilities are there, and the big thing in the area, as you all I'm sure are aware, is there's no sewer or sewer or water services there. So people have septic and they have wells and that type of thing. We also look at the natural resources, and that's what's shown on your right. When you look at that, you see a lot of yellow. The Mid-America Regional Council has something called a natural resource inventory, where staff went out and assessed and looked at all the different resources in the region. And so this is the snapshot for the corridor. The yellow is showing cultivated land. When we showed that at the public meeting, people said it's pasture. So basically what you see is not a lot of development. It's a lot of open space, a lot of grass. It's really pretty out there. One of the other things that we look at is growth. Like, is your community growing and where is it growing? So what you're looking at there is a map of Leavenworth County. The bottom here, south of the words Tonganoxie, that is our project area. The areas in the darkest green are the areas where we are seeing the most growth. And this is looking at census data between 2000 and 2010, because that's when the last census was done. And this map is showing where there's change. So where there's the most change is the darkest areas. And County Road 1 is not in the areas where you're seeing the most change. They did see some growth, but not as much as you see on the west side of Leavenworth or by Lansing. I mentioned before that growth in Tonganoxie and Basehor is really happening fast. The next several graphs that you're going to see are going to show Leavenworth County Road in green. You'll see Tonganoxie in red. We compare that against Basehor in blue and Linwood in yellow. Anytime you see a dot in between the two, small dots in between the larger dots, that's an estimate. The census provides estimates, and so it gives you kind of a projection. And as far as we can go right now is 2020. So basically, communities are growing. We also look at when homes were built. Most of them were built in the 80s, 90s, and the first decade in 2000 in all of the communities in the corridor. Also, median home values are growing, which is a good sign in all communities. The other thing we look at is when you're talking about housing and when it's built is whether or not people may be having a hard time affording a home. And so that's another data source that we look at. There's about 20% of residents in the county that could be having a housing cost burden. Housing cost burden is defined as when you are paying maybe 30% or more of your income on your housing costs. In the housing industry and in planning industry, we are also starting to look at transportation costs, and some are arguing that you should incorporate transportation costs with housing, because that may prove that some people are having an even greater burden just to travel and live. What does that mean? It means that we want to start thinking about your proximity of where you live to where you work and how that affects how you drive and how much you need to spend. Another thing is to think about generations. Y'all have heard of millennials. You've heard of Generation Xers and the baby boomers. And so what this graph is showing is just a breakdown of those generations in Leavenworth County. And for the most part, except for the matures, which are the people after the baby boomers, which are shown in green, you have a pretty even distribution. Something that's really interesting about that is that different generations have different housing needs. So your older generations, if they're living on lots of space right now in their home, as they get older, sometimes they don't want to do that. And so we just tried to think about the different types of housing options that those generations may be appealing to them or that they may need. Some of that has to do with affordability. When you're younger, you can't afford 20 plus acres and a house. Sometimes you need something smaller. And as a region, we're looking at housing options in all communities, particularly what the Mid-America Regional Council would call activity centers. Activity centers are basically your community, so Tonganoxie would be an activity center for Leavenworth in this area. Another thing we look at is how residents are educated. All the residents in this part of the county are pretty well educated, and you can see when you look at that, we're looking from the top, from less than 9th grade all the way down to a graduate degree at the bottom, and most people have either a high school diploma or some type of college, which is important because that affects your purchasing power, your jobs that you're going to be able to get, how much income you can generate as a family. Then we think about where are people working. In the center, again, of this map, this is from 2014. This is the center of our metropolitan area. Where you see the blue, that's where there are high job concentrations. Where you start to, the blue gets lighter and lighter until you don't see it anymore, that's where there are less. And this is not really surprising being in this area. We know that the center, like downtown Kansas City, Missouri, going south, has most of the jobs. Going down I-35 also has the jobs. This is Tonganoxie. There are some there, but they're not as dark as downtown. That data that I showed you before was from 2014. The newest data that we could get was for 2015. And this is showing the county in more detail. Again, where you see the darker colors is where you see more of the jobs in the county. And so again, the County Road 1, this corridor study is here. Not a lot of jobs there. But that's not surprising. I mean, we've shown maps before. There's not vacant land, but undeveloped land, cultivated land, pastures, rural residential in character, etc. People who are working are driving, just under 30 minutes to work. And so that means that they're going to other places. You all know they're going to Lawrence. They could be going to Topeka. They're going other places in this corridor for jobs. The industries that people tend to be working in have to do with education and health. Regardless of the drive and whether or not there's a cost burden, things of that sort, people are starting to see incomes increasing, which is really good. So I mentioned before that we had community feedback, we had public meetings, and we had stakeholder focus group meetings. We had an opinion survey also. The first one we did, it was really just big picture things, and so we had 162 people respond to that. We asked them how they would describe themselves, and most of them described themselves as property owners or residents. Key thing that we asked when we were first starting the project is just to get an idea of, where do people want to be in the future? What do they think about the corridor in the future? So we asked in 10 years, what word would you use to describe the area? And rural country, rural residential, that was the top thing, which is good for us because we can think about just the theme of where you want to go in the future. We asked about the land development challenges that we're facing in the corridor, and, cannot lean on the enter button. I'm doing this. Okay, challenges. The top two were impacts to homes or businesses, and anytime you're talking about change, that's what I find to be one of the top things that people are talking about, whether they're talking about land use or transportation. That's always the top thing. Followed by access to water lines and sewer, because it's hard to develop if you don't have those things. In terms of opportunities to leverage for the future, people really like the residential rural character, as well as open space and the proximity to other cities. I mean, this is a really special place because you can be out in a beautiful area, but you can also get to where you need to go. Meaning you can go to downtown, you can go to Ledges, you can go to Lawrence, you can go to Topeka. It's all pretty close. We asked if the corridor were to develop, should new development be targeted to specific locations? We asked that because I want to be sure that people are not thinking that you need to see development lined all the way adjacent to the street, like Corridor 1. That maybe it's targeted in certain locations, because it is 6 miles, and when it's all added up together, it's 18 square miles. That's a lot of the area. So we got yes, target to specific locations, followed by no development should happen. The most important types of development to see happening in the corridor, the top two things were a mix of uses in one location and parks and open space. Oh, sorry, that's not right. The top thing was parks and open space. Second thing was residential, followed by a mix of uses in one location. And then industrial was a close fourth with office. At that first public meeting, with these questions in mind, we also wanted to know where could you see some of these uses happening. So we brought maps to the meeting that had nothing on them except the aerial for the project, the aerial and the streets. Around the room were some of the maps that I showed you before about existing land use and zoning and things of that sort. And so the people that came to the meeting used these colored circles that look just like the ones that are on screen and placed those on maps during the meeting. And so there's people, you can see them doing it on the left, and on the far right, that's an example of one of the maps that people use to put their dots on. As a planner, what we do is we take all those and then kind of interpret all the copies of it that we had to see where there are some similarities about where people think housing should go or where shopping should go. We also asked them to use the Post-it notes that you see in the pink and yellow to tell us where the challenges and opportunities were. So anything that you see in pink were challenges, and anything that you see in yellow were opportunities, and so we kind of have a mix. We also had people that drew on the map and said, please stay off of this property, don't look at that, things of that sort. And all that's legitimate, we have to listen to all that, we want to make sure that we know going forward. Followed by from that public meeting, we had a stakeholder focus group with a small group of people just to go through what we had heard up to that point. So everything from the public meeting and the opinion survey. And then we went through and did some concepts. And those concepts were the result of looking at all those maps and the challenges and opportunities. So here's the first concept. This one is basically showing where you see the area in white, all of that is just agriculture. Basically leaving things how it is right now. And then, for orientation's sake, this is Tonganoxie up here. I had to turn the map so I can get it on here, and the legend. We have where the business park is. This was industrial with some commercial. We have industrial with some mixed use on the south side of I-70. Put in some housing in this area. This area right here is the same area where on the existing land use map you see the smaller lots of low density or single family residential. The next concept that we tried to explore is similar, except this node right here is commercial. Next to the business park, there's more mixed use, but it's on both sides of the interchange. The housing is still down there, but we also explored some new ideas, which were agribusiness and an agri-hood. Agribusiness is like when someone has a winery, and then they want people to come and enjoy that experience, or they want to have people, I don't know, I think that sunflower business down there on the south side would be considered agribusiness, so people come and enjoy the sunflowers, they could get touristy types of things. That's what agribusiness is. It can also be considered dairy farming. That's a type of agribusiness. We talked to them also about agri-hood. Agri-hood is basically a residential neighborhood. It's very compact. It's built around a working farm. So the people there are getting use out of what's being grown there, et cetera, and so on. The agribusiness idea, along with agritourism, were one of the things that came out of that public meeting. There was agritourism, and when you look at the appendix of your study document, there's agritourism written on some of those maps as an idea to explore. We also talked about phasing. Land use planning and development can take a long time. So based on trends and how growth is going, we estimated that since we know that with the business park on the north side, that utilities are going to be extended, this area here is likely to be the first to develop if anything develops. And if the county decided, then you might focus on the interchange. And that could be a 20-year plan if you focus on just those two areas. Then, last month, we had another stakeholder meeting. And we had a public open house. And for those meetings, we talked about the two concepts that are here behind me now. For both of those public meetings, we sent out postcards to everyone. And we were on social media. Now, the key thing about the second public meeting, we had more specific concepts. Lots of detail, I would say, was in that survey that people took. We had 88 respondents to that. Most of them, again, were residents or property owners. We asked, though, about goals. In your study document, there are goals and strategies that relate to those goals. We wanted to get an idea of the degree of importance that people thought for that. And that's because those goals and things inform what's on those land use concepts. So we asked about respecting streams, floodplains, and areas with steep topography and sensitive soils. People said that was very important. In terms of making sure the development is bordered by other development, that was also somewhat very important to people. Ensuring that we have enhanced the corridor scenic and rural residential character. Again, very important to somewhat important. Concentrating commercial at mix or mix of uses at activity centers. We had a mix there. When you add them all up, there's more for at least somewhat important or very important than there are for it's not important or somewhat not unimportant. We also asked about generating economic development interest in the corridor, and I would say there's a mix there as well, about whether or not there's interest in that. But the very importance to somewhat importance are still edging out a little bit in comparison to those who are not as interested in that. Again, we asked about specific types of land development. Now, in the previous survey, we asked general things like, should we have residential development? That's it. And then, now that we've moved forward in the process, we've asked about specific types. You all know that there is single-family development, there are two-family housing, there is multifamily housing, there is rural residential, there's a lot of options. And so now we have a lot of options, and so we had asked the community to give their feedback. And I don't think it's surprising, considering the things that we know that people value. A lot of interest in agriculture preserves, having open space, and having residential development that has larger lots than your standard community. So like Tonganoxie would be like at an urban density, low density residential. We didn't have any real feedback for that in terms of support for that. It's one of the smallest numbers on the chart. Something else that we do, we listen to community, we take our professional experience and things that we've worked on, we work together as a team with the county, but then we also look at the landscape. More than just what the natural resource inventory has in it. And we look at things what we would call suitability. So what this map is showing, it builds on the drainage map that was on the previous slide. And what it's showing is your topography. It's also showing your utilities, your floodplain, your wooded areas, and taking into consideration best management practices. So when you look at this, you see that there are dark red colors and orange colors. Those dark red areas are areas that have steep slopes, possibly too steep to develop on. Where you have orange, those are your areas where the slope isn't as steep, might be around 10%. You could develop on that, but the best practice would be to do cluster development. Y'all know what cluster development is. So that means that we're not spreading development all over the site because it's there. You're clustering it close together. So we look at areas where that might be possible because you can have clustered types of land use on your map. We also looked at suitability. So the federal government has soil data, and so you can get a hold of that. And so we looked at it for hand planting and mechanical planting because we know that rural residential agricultural preserve is really important out here. So what it's telling us is whether or not how suitable soil is. And so where you see like the yellow and orange, we're kind of in the mid-level of suitability for that. The red areas, if there were any, would be the areas where that wouldn't be suitable, and green areas would be areas where it would be. When we also looked at soil in terms of what could you put into the ground, because development involves digging and you have footings for your buildings and things of that sort. So we looked at risk of concrete corrosion or risk of steel corrosion. On the left is risk of concrete corrosion. So you get a lot of green. So the risk of that is very low. In terms of steel corrosion on the right, the risk is high. What that means is that if you were to develop out there and you go and look at this in more detail, you're probably going to have to look at your soils. You might have to add something to your soils. As a developer, that might cost a little bit more than if you didn't have that type of soil out there. We also looked at dwellings with basements and dwellings without basements, and we still have a lot of red. There isn't anything for industrial, but there is something for small commercial buildings. That's what you see on the left. Still some red, so you have to add to the soil. And you would add aggregate or something to make it more stable so that you can compress it so that you could build on it. They have the same information, roughly the same findings for local roads and streets. So as we started to craft land use scenarios and options, we had to think about certain assumptions, and one of those is that this is a really beautiful area. And open space is important to people, but infrastructure may not be ready to support intensive development. Change is also likely to happen slowly. If you consider where growth is happening elsewhere in your county, this is not one of the high growth areas in terms of population and that type of thing. So as it grows, it's probably going to happen more slowly than fast, just in comparison, even though we know Tonganoxie and Basel are one of your fastest growing communities. The interchange provides potential for access as well as economic development. You all have invested in that. We know that's very important to you. So there are going to be opportunity areas related to that, and there are going to be key points that people come into the corridor, primarily from the north and the south. So from that, we developed a framework of goals. And so I'm going to go through these few slides rather quickly because these are also related to the survey questions that I just went through. So the first goal is, again, for respecting your natural environment. The strategies that relate to that have to do with buffering your streams, providing open space between uses, and then clustering development. Another goal is to ensure contiguous development, and that is that development adjacent to other development. And so you want to pair that with your utilities and also master planning. We know the county is planning to have your utility master plan, your transportation master plan, so as you grow, you want all that to be married together. It wasn't done at the time that we're doing this because there's two different processes, but as you go forward, you want to combine that. And if Tonganoxie is extending utilities, then you want to coordinate with them. Enhancing the corridor's scenic and rural residential character in terms of an asset, your utilities, and this is about not having utility lines all over the place. This is burying utilities in certain locations, things of that sort, so they don't become kind of an eyesore. And also buffering single-family residential development and being sure that you take a look at the soils. Because if the soils need to have additives added to them, let's say if you have a development project and they find out they need to do something like that, that's also going to affect the density of development that could happen there, even if we have it on a map. The last thing is generating economic development, combining agriculture investment. So agriculture is really important. One of the cool things that we learned about on this project was that there's the animal health corridor. Y'all know about that, right? And so someone wrote that on one of the maps at the first public meeting. So then we looked into what that animal health corridor is. I mean, there is a horse hospital closer to Basel than Tonganoxie, closer to Basel, but that's the only one for a long ways. We know that animal health is something that the school district is looking at. That's something that the region is looking at. So is there a way to pair in your economic development strategy and approach animal health with the other things that are happening in the region as well as agriculture? And then master plan what's going to happen at your activity centers. Great to be connected with roadway networks, but this is a very rural area. Trails and greenways to take advantage of your streams and that kind of thing will be really important. If you have an employment center that's developed, for example, at the interchange, then employees like to be able to walk and experience things as well. So it starts to think about not just vehicular traffic, but people walking through, depending on what development you have and where. Also marketing and then actually having an economic development strategy. Okay. So Jeff showed you two maps. I'm going to go to them a little bit more detail. The maps each show some combination of the residential land uses that you see on the left and the non-residential ones on the right. It's just an issue of which ones are on which map. But essentially this is the summary of it. Again, different densities of residential. There are ways of doing cluster development with respect to topography in your wooded areas, that sort, and then there's non-residential. You can still have cluster non-residential, as well as mixed use, agriculture, and all of that. So here are the two concepts. This is looking at them head on, side by side. Concept A is on the left, concept B is on the right. The thing about concept A is there is a lot more going on in concept A in terms of land use, color. I mean, just when you look at it in terms of brightness, there's a lot of activity there. When you look at concept B, it's different. However, when you look at it, Jeff had said it's pretty much like it is today. The zoning, when I showed you the zoning map, and I had said you have rural residential zoning for the most part, and you have that 2.5 acre minimum and then the 5 acre minimum, pretty much that's what that map is showing on the right, with the exception of the industrial shown in purple by I-70, the mixed use that's next to that, which is on the east side of Corridor 1, and then the commercial that's shown up by the business park. That's different than the zoning. There is software that helps us planners figure out what the things that we're drawing on the map are actually doing or what they're generating. So there's a tool called Envision Tomorrow, and I love the name of that. It helps us envision what that is. So what you're seeing for the next few slides will show, for the most part, the existing corridor right now, concept A and concept B. What you're seeing in the orange are people, and then you're going to see households and school children. I mentioned that concept A has a lot of color, there's a lot going on. It's also generating a lot of people, school children, and households. Much more so than concept B. Something else that we'd like to do is try to get an idea of how long is that going to take based on your current growth trend. So we looked at your census data again, but I looked at a 20-year period of census data to get an idea of what your average growth rate is. In the corridor 1, it has a growth rate of about like 5% on average for the last 20 years, according to the census. And then Tonganoxie's growth rate is like 3.5%. But we know from other studies that the county has done that Tonganoxie may even be growing faster than that average growth rate, the average annual growth rate. So really what that tells us is that for the first scenario, let me go back. Scenario A, which I would say scenario A is very optimistic. It could take about 40 years to get to that point. Scenario B is way more conservative, and that could take about 20 years to do, based on the growth. So if we're looking at this, if it's hard to see, Tonganoxie's growth rate is that blue color, and then corridor 1 is the black. There's like 500 and some odd people in corridor 1 right now. Something else that Envision Tomorrow helps us understand is what's the housing mix. So I mentioned before that having a variety of housing stock is important, at least to the region. And also as you think about the generations in your communities, what do you have to offer them? Concept A is offering different types of housing more so than you would see in Concept B, and even more than in the existing right now. We also look at the employment mix, so how much of it is industrial versus retail office. I think Concept A and B are a little bit comparable, however, Concept B has more industrial. Something else that we look at is the jobs to housing balance to see what it is. Ideally, you want to be at 0.75 to 1.5. You're over that in both scenarios. We know from other studies, that study that was done after the interchange from 2006, that what would be generated would help your tax base and things of that sort, but not necessarily increase your population. So this is really showing that you have more jobs than homes. And so that means that you would be drawing people from other places to come and work at your employment center if you were to create one. And that's what that industrial and that retail and that mixed use is showing on the maps. So I was talking before about growth. This is the new population. So concept A is a lot more people. It's also a lot more jobs. So the population there is at 28,000. For reference, there are about 36,000 people in Leavenworth. Not the county, the city of Leavenworth. And then Concept B is smaller. Envision Tomorrow also lets us input your sales tax rates and property tax rates and all of that to figure out how much is being generated per acre. And again, there's more going on in Concept A. Your numbers are higher than in Concept B. Something else that was really important is to get an idea of what the look and feel of future land development would be in the corridor. So a way to ask community members that is to show them pictures of things and see what is most important. So at our first stakeholder and focus group meeting, we gave everybody green dots, and we showed them a series of the look and feel of what these land uses might look like. Where you see green dots is where they put their dots. We also asked the public last month, and they use blue dots. The fact that there are some light blue dots and some dark blue dots doesn't matter. They're just blue dots, and they stuck them on there. There weren't a lot of dots on agri-hood and agribusiness, so you don't really see that in the land use, on the land use maps. But what you do see when you're talking about single family is a lot of dots at the bottom for rural residential, some for large lot, a little bit for traditional, very few for multifamily. And the key question for each of these boards is, if this were here, what should it look like? Commercial, better distribution there. Industrial, small scale, large scale. We did ask the stakeholder focus group about campus style, because that would mean that you would have, instead of buildings close together and entrances, that you would have some green space and all of that. And they really did not like that as much as they like the smaller scale and the larger scale. So you see more dots there. The public seem to be a little bit opposite of that. They put their dots on the pictures there. I'm telling you, you can't lean on these keys like I'm doing. Okay, mixed use. Y'all know what mixed use is. There's different ways of showing mixed use. What we wanted to do is show how it stacks or is against one another. So mixed use could be industrial and commercial. You could also have some housing in there. So the top picture is showing a vertical mixed use. You guys are familiar with live work, and so you have your commercial space on the bottom, you live above. That's what that's showing. You can also do horizontal mixed use, which means that you basically have like modules of a single use next to another. You can also do a combination of that, and some would argue that that is walkable. People like the vertical mixed use, which I think in this region we're all used to seeing that, more so than the other two. In terms of design guidance to keep it high level, the area is really wonderful. So you typically don't want to have development spread all over the place. So if you can keep it compact and tight and have a consistent, compatible look with the area, that would seem to be the way to go. So we provided design guidance about in that frame of mind. So it applies to buildings and lots for open space circulation. So how transportation is happening with your car or with your bicycle or as a pedestrian. Also parking signage, landscaping, and buffering uses. That's important because on your future land use map, you don't put open space corridors like everywhere, so to speak. Ours are all tied to what we might call an environmental corridor. So where's the stream? Where's the floodplain next to that? Where are the wooded areas next to that? And that gets us an environmental corridor, and that gets us open space designation on the map. But when actual development happens, you want landscape guidelines that help to further buffer, like in your mixed use areas, that area from your low density residential area. And then all of that guidance helps to supplement what you already have established right now, which is your supplemental special development district regulations. And that is it. We have this meeting, and then we know we are going to your Board of Commissioners. And Tonganoxie had mentioned potentially going there, and so that's to be determined. But our next step is to talk with you all today, and then go to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay. Have any questions on the presentation? Have you done, I think that you do this all over. Is that correct, or?
And I would say in the metro. We've worked in lots of communities.
Okay. How does this compare to other areas you've been in?
I would say this is probably the most rural. Meaning, usually we are working like in the small town, so we would work in Tonganoxie, for example, a small community like that. Sometimes a larger city. The difference is, I think we talked about this as a team a lot, is the scale here, because there isn't a lot, the parcels are so large.
Mm-hmm.
And so what strategy you should take in order to figure out what's going to happen there. I think that was the big difference. Just how rural it is and how undeveloped it is, and what the scale is. I think that's the biggest difference from places that we've worked before.
Have you worked in an area this larger scale before?
Yes.
And it was a concept similar?
Nope, because every concept is based on what's going on in the community, and who you talk to, and what all the factors are, and what the analysis shows.
Okay. All right. Any other questions so far?
It seems to me your concept A, you've got two extremes. A, very intensive, and B, basically exactly the way it is now, more or less. Was there any thought given to having something in between, or?
There
Talk us through
was,
that.
we went through several, you're saying like the fine-tuned version. of
Right, yeah,
this.
I understand.
We had several versions of that, and in the end, I'll let Jeff add on to this, is what is going to be important to you all in terms of what could be thought of as your highest and best use.
We looked at reducing the scale, but the problem is these parcels are so big that it's impossible to cut the land use like in half. So either you go all the way or you don't do anything to that parcel. So that's one of the challenges that we had with this.
Any other questions, anybody? Mark, are you satisfied, or?
Can I just make a comment? I'd like to say I've looked at many of these things over the last 45 years, and this is a very good product.
Oh, good, thank you.
Yeah, it was very, very well.
Yeah, good professional product.
Right, I agree. All right. Nothing else, we'll continue. Thank you very much. Upon opening the public comment portion of this hearing, those of you who wish to speak either for or against this item, upon recognition, will give your name and address each time you begin to speak. This is necessary since the public hearing is being recorded. Also, everybody, for sake so everybody has a chance to talk, we will limit everybody's comments to 3 minutes. Stephanie will keep track of it here. Also, if you came in and haven't had an opportunity to sign the sign-in sheet, please do so before you leave. If you want, you can pass it around. It's on the table back there, so please do that. The public comment portion of this hearing is now open. We will now hear from individuals present wishing to speak in favor of this request. In favor? You can just form a line if you want to talk on it.
Well, thank you for the time to address this commission this evening. My name is Dan Hubble, and I'm speaking on behalf of Harmon Farm LLC, located at 22398 Honey Creek Road, Tonganoxie. We are addressing the Planning Commission this evening to request that they move forward with the proposed land use recommendations. In 2008, a thoroughfare across our property was condemned to build a road to accommodate turnpike access for County Road 1. The thoroughfare completely changed the character of the farm property as it bisected the property in half. The county announced at that time its intention to monitor and control development along this corridor to recoup the costs associated with the road improvements and to police construction to ensure that it was developed consistent with this overall goal. Even though the county took some steps consistent with this objective, including establishing a moratorium on the land which has persisted for over a decade, by taking proactive steps to define the nature of the development that they felt was consistent with this goal. After the recent debacle with the proposed industrial development that was recently contemplated for this area, which I might add was initially approved and endorsed by the governing body of Leavenworth County, the county has finally taken steps to define a plan that will hopefully guide the future development of this corridor consistent with the county's intention to facilitate development that will enhance the area's tax base and future growth for southern Leavenworth County. Plan A more closely achieves this objective by planning for controlled commercial and economic development. It is our request that the Planning Commission accept the recommendation as offered for Plan A and request that the County Commissioners promptly move to accept this plan to define the future development for this important corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor?
Good evening. My name's Don Budd. I've
Address, please, Mr. Budd.
19576 Evans, Tonganoxie.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm a landowner in several counties across the state of Kansas. I've sat on several master plan committees. I've sat on Wildlife Parks and Tourism here in Kansas as a commissioner. So I feel the pain you guys are going through here because it's a difficult choice. In this instance, you've got two plans and you've got a pretty distinct difference in the two. If you pick either plan, the one consideration I think you've got to realize is it's a moving target. Once again, I've sat on these things, and the first person that's going to come to you and want to do something in either one of these plans is going to be contrary to what that plan says. And so you're just going to have consideration for that, no matter which one of these you pick. Secondly, if you pick the more dense plan, Concept A, to move on, are those areas that are commercial, industrial, something that is going to be considered lesser use as something that is approved, or is that going to be a battle throughout as well? So in other words, if you've got an industrial parcel here and you want to make it a residential parcel, it should be a no-brainer, but I'd like, I guess, the planning director to address that once I get finished. But the bottom line is the ag reserve I understand, because once again, I'm a farmer, I'm a real estate developer, and I'm everything in between. So I understand all points of this. There are programs that allow you, if you like ag preserve, if you like, and I have these type of programs for wildlife, for wetlands, you can put them in federal or state programs. And you can designate it for that if you are the landowner. So if that's what each and every one of these landowners want to do to protect their land, they can certainly do that without having the county commission or anything else regulate that. I think the responsibility of this commission is simply to the county taxpayers as a whole, not to the County Road 1 corridor property owners. It doesn't matter what I say as a property owner, a single property owner here. I think the commission has to pick what's the best financial responsibility for the entire county. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this request? In favor?
Joe Herring, 16630 Gilman Road. I've stood in front of this board and Board of County Commissioners about the moratorium in the Special Development District many times, asking for it to be removed and letting the people do what they need to do with their property. And we're finally at that point. Your decision's hard, but an observation that was made on Teresa's presentation, she said the one thing that our corridor does do, it allows for people to get to I-70 quickly, go to Lawrence, Topeka, Legends, Kansas City. It gets them out of our county and takes our tax dollars away from us. Something needs to be done here so we can keep our tax dollars, our tax base in our county. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this request? In favor? Now hear from individuals present wishing to speak in opposition. In opposition.
My name is Jesse Lowen. I live at 14279 214th Street in Linwood, Kansas. That's right about here on the map. In other words, right in the area that's going to get hit by either option A or option B. Areas that you intend to turn into either mixed use or mixed use. We moved out to the country last year, built a house out here we bought the land for in 2015. Moved out here last year so that we could be away from the city, away from the larger populations. We could have elbow room. So I would be able to shoot guns on my property and so that my kids could ride four-wheelers and grow up without having to worry about neighbors, essentially. We wanted to be away from the city lights, the city problems, away from the sound of the sirens every damn night, which we were able to hear in Shawnee, Kansas every night. Development out here is going to do a couple of things. It's going to increase your tax base, yeah, but it's also going to result in a bunch of new housing and new problems that come up when you build housing in areas. It's going to result in more crime. It's going to result in people trying to say, I can't do what I want to do on my own property, and I'm vehemently opposed to that. It's going to result in an increase in taxes the whole thing to fund this whole thing, you want to extend the utilities out there, you're going to ask us to pay more taxes for it. You're going to ask me, who will not benefit from what you want to do, who is actually going to be harmed by it, to pay more taxes to fund the extension of the utilities out here, out to my area. I came out here so I could live in a country environment surrounded by blue skies, cattle, pasture land, and peace and quiet. Not so I could be surrounded by all the noise, the hustle and bustle of the city. I don't need a gas station on that interchange. I don't need a 7-Eleven. I don't need a fast food joint out there. What I need is just a way to get to and from where I'm going. And that's what I've got right now. And that's all I want. What's more, the way this whole process has been underway, we did not know, my wife and I did not know that this was even happening. This whole conversation was even taking place until we received a letter about it roughly 2 weeks ago. We are unquestionably a stakeholder. We're right in the middle of this. And yet we were only informed about this 2 weeks ago. We haven't been able to attend any of the meetings because we didn't know they were even having the meetings. To say that we feel that this has been somewhat underhanded is an understatement. Again, that's all I really got to say. I don't want this to happen. I'd like to see neither of these two options occur. I'd like you to leave it as it is and let us continue to live in peace.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? In opposition? Just come on up. I mean, let's keep it moving along. If you want to form a line, that's fine too, if there's enough of you that want to speak.
Marlene Malone, 22924 Hemp Hill Road, Tonganoxie. And I basically just want to second everything he said. I think that that's why people move out here, was they came because this is what they wanted, and I don't want to see it changed.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name's Mary Gergic. I live at 21610 Kansas Avenue. Our family was born and raised in Kansas City, Kansas. We moved to Tonganoxie in 1967, so we've been here many, many years. We moved out here to Tonganoxie rural area for that environment, for the peace and quiet, tranquility, the agricultural life, the wildlife. My life has been totally, I want to say, messed up since the county commissioners voted to have the city of Tonganoxie put an industrial park across the street from us. Our family does not want all of this development. When the city was able to purchase that 200+ acres on Kansas Avenue by the Paradise Trailer Court, all we've had is noise. I was just about getting post-traumatic stress syndrome because for 9 months, the city of Tonganoxie, with the blessing of the county commissioners of Leavenworth County, giving them money to develop that 200+ acres, for 9 months, all we heard was banging on that gravel, on that rock ledge that's out there. This property, this area that you're wanting to develop has, and I've heard it runs from Tonganoxie all the way to Manhattan. There's like 5 feet under that soil level is pure rock. So to develop this area, you've got to go in there. They brought in 10 giant earth-moving machines. For 9 months, we lived in this peaceful, quiet, tranquil space, agriculture all around us. For 9 months, 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, for 12 hours every day, for 9 months, all we heard was banging, and it ruined there's 3 Gergic families that live on Kansas Avenue out here by the industrial park. I had structural damage to both my homes, to both of our farmhouses, from all the banging on that gravel, that rock ledge. You get 10 giant earth-moving machines out there, and they're destroying that ground. They ruined my brother's fishing lake. I couldn't turn the TV up loud enough to drown out the noise. It was just, we were living in this peaceful, quiet area, like he was saying, and all we had was all this terrible noise. It was just terrible. I couldn't turn the TV up. You couldn't pray. You couldn't do anything because all you heard was this machinery. Okay. Thank you for your time. I'm against both these concepts. I want to keep it rural as it is.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition?
I'm Lindsay Blancardi. I live at 22800 Wood End Road. We built a home out there, and when we got the permit for it, this was something that on the books, I guess you would say, for a plan. Yet we were granted a permit to build a residential home in an industrial heavy area. We would have never done that. My main concern is water and sewer. Number one, we are on a well, we are on a septic. I do know that the streams that actually flow through there are already impaired. So I'm not sure what they're talking about of walking trails and things of that nature, because it is already under stress. I've heard it amazes me that you guys continue to go through these plans, yet there's no consideration taken for water or sewer. And specifically, we were told during these meetings that it was not on the agenda. That wasn't part of their research, I guess you would say. I just see it mentioned here. That's the first time really that I've seen it mentioned. It's pretty much been stayed away from since. But again, my main concern is the water, the well. We already have problems with it. I am affected by it daily. Not what we planned on at all. We had 3 kids. We planned to be there and let them graduate school. Both my husband and I grew up there in Tongi, and everything that's been going on here over the last, since the corridor actually went in, has been completely opposite of what we grew up with and actually moved back to raise our kids in. So I don't think there's been good planning at all with the waste, with the disposal, with sewer, with anything that has to do with waste. And that is a big concern of mine.
Yes, ma'am. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Is there any additional information to be presented?
I just wanted to answer Mr. Bird's question about change in use. So if the land use plan is approved with a commercial on a certain area, if a residential subdivision comes in, the staff would be recommending commercial because that's what's shown on the land use plan.
Okay.
So it'll be based on what the use is on the land use.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
That's all I have.
The public comment portion of this hearing is now closed. Are there any questions or comments, commissioners? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question before a motion is made. Does that motion need to include, like, a motion for Plan A or a motion for Plan B, or just a motion to go ahead?
One or the other.
One or the other, right? I mean, yeah, that's what we're here, yeah. Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we approve Concept A. I think it's the best thing for the county with that interchange being there. We know we need to bring some businesses to the county, and I mean, that's the right place to do it. I mean, it's next to a major interstate, so I think it's something that for the county, I think is the best thing to do. So I would vote for Concept A.
I'll second that motion.
Motion on the floor with a second to approve concept A. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, have a roll call vote. Jay Swin,
Yes.
Jeanette Levy Holdeman,
Yes.
Wolf Smith. Yes. Dave Clark.
No.
And the reason?
I believe that it needs to keep its agricultural integrity.
Mark Danny.
Yes.
John Matthews.
Yes.
And I vote yes. And the motion carries 6-1. Board of County Commissioners will consider this item 9 a.m. on November 13th at the Leavenworth County Courthouse. That's right here. If you want to express your opinion there, the final decision, be here on the 14th at 9 a.m. November 13th.
13.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
14.
Oh, I'm sorry. I added one. It says 13th. I'm sorry. It is November 13th at 9 a.m. Anything else? We're adjourned.